it's Kyley.
And it's Eva.
Welcome back to Hello Universe.
Hello, friends. Good to be with you again this week.
Yeah. So, per usual, Eva and I were already having like half of an episode recorded before we hit record. Our intention in this episode, to jump like right into it, is to kind of have a follow-up from last week. So if you listen to last week's episode, we were unpacking, like, we're ready to blow up the show. What does it look like? And what is the difference between like how we create that and allow that versus steps and doing?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like,
it was, if I can interrupt, it was like very much intentionally like a business meeting, but non-traditional, like intentionally being like, wait, what is actually really important? Is it like who we are being and what we are believing, or is it all like the strategic steps? And I think
it was a very Hello Universe approach to business.
Yes, exactly. And I think in that conversation, we both unpacked, because in order to have that conversation, we had to be like, how do we make this podcast huge? Obviously, we had to look at the stuff that is getting in the way. So we both shared, and it was really like eye-opening and interesting, I think.
So if you haven't listened, it was basically like a deep dive of like coaching and shadow work as a recorded episode business meeting, which in some ways feels like if someone was like, pick one episode to represent Hello Universe, it might be that one. In some ways.
Really? Yeah, I'd have to think about that. Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, it will hit the consideration list, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
But especially because we landed on some, I think, pretty significant emotional ahas in the process of that conversation, and kind of unpacking our own story around what is and isn't required, we wanted to have basically like a follow-up conversation, like what shifted in the week since, what are we like, where are we at now, and also like pulling in some new ideas that have circulated for us in the last week.
Yeah. I mean, full transparency for me, it was like accountability, being like, I had this like really rich conversation with you, this beautiful sort of like aha moment. And I wanted to make sure that we like put in time into our lives to be like, hey, can we actually follow up with that? So it doesn't just like float away into the ether. But I mean, I would also argue that once the intention is kind of set, though, things are already kind of changing. But I want to actually like share this process, because I think for listeners who might be like interested in this path too, to be like, well, we're gonna doing it with you, right? And also accountability, follow up. I don't know. I know that sometimes I enjoy observing and I learn from other people's processes, especially if they're just like real time. So I
also feel like what I'm also hearing you speak to is like an honoring, right? Like we ended up having like a really emotional conversation, and so honoring that by witnessing what has already begun to shift, and like just continuing to engage with it because it felt significant.
Yeah.
And so actually on that note, I think my question would be, 1 week later, what feels like your biggest like takeaway, or the thing that stuck with you? Or
okay, so I don't know if this is a takeaway. I think this is why I'm so happy we're having this conversation, because I kind of just want to like ask you for your opinion. I think my thought afterwards was like, okay, so just to recap so people know, I think the takeaway that I came away with was this idea of like, I was afraid that I can't trust God to work a certain kind of way. And then my realization was like, of course I can't trust God. Like they don't work in this nice, neat package the way that I want to. And it doesn't mean that I'm not safe. And I actually believe the paradox is actually leaning into the unknown is actually the very thing that might provide me with what I want. Right? I don't even know how I'm summarizing it right, because it seems like this sort of nebulous, metaphysical, paradoxical.
Yeah, it got really swoopy in the middle of the conversation.
But it really was an idea of like, hey, let go. let
Yeah.
go, like, and trust that that's like what we are doing is enough. And the trust itself is what infuses, I believe, this work with the, I don't know, the magic that can
Yeah.
make things actually easeful without needing
Yeah.
to be constantly efforting.
Yeah.
And so I realized, I was like, great, awesome. Now, am I actually being that? Am I actually
Mm,
like believing that? And so I think my takeaway has been more like, oh wait, that was like so beautiful. How can I be really intentional in my everyday about reminding myself of this
mm,
truth that I want to live by? And I think my question to you is like, is that even necessary? I guess I want to say is that feels good to me. So like I
mhm,
want to do it. But I guess what's interesting is like how easy it is to forget.
mm.
Like that to me feels like the quote unquote work now. And by the way, I don't want to, I even use that word work in quotations because I want to make it seem like there isn't work, but at the same time, there is a piece of work here for me, I
It's
believe. And I
work
don't
that you like doing, right?
exactly.
It's like it's pleasure, it's enjoyable for you,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Right.
Yeah,
And
and or
that,
nourishing in a certain kind
and
of
it
way.
feels aligned rather than saying like, okay, how can I create like better audio clips for my Instagram,
Right.
for my Instagram
Right.
feed? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So the work
Yes.
is like, um, can I continuously believe, I guess, and be really
Mm,
active and intentional about it? So I think that's kind of what I've been trying to do. And honestly, not, I don't know if it's a huge, great deal of success because also what's happened is like life has gotten busy and then I've like pulled away and I've been like focused on other stuff. And then so
mm,
every once in a while I'll come back and remember. But I think there can be more energy put behind that in an intentional way.
mm. Well, and what I think is interesting is, first of all, how in some ways we ultimately ended at the same place, even though it felt different, right? Which was
Mm-hmm.
both about like kind of trust and softening. And for me, it was a lot about self-trust. And I actually am just realizing right now, uh, the whole theme of my week was self-trust. And I
Mm.
actually registered it and said it to somebody without at that time linking it back to our podcast
Oh,
conversation. Like
interesting.
we kicked something off, and then the whole theme for me was just like all of these opportunities to be like, and what if you trusted yourself? And what if you trusted yourself? And trusting yourself has meant like, what if you trusted your desire? What if you trusted that you weren't punished for your desire? What if
Mm-hmm.
you trusted, um, you know, what your body's telling you?
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole theme of the week has been self-trust. And so for me, I think kind of speaking to your question of like, is it required, you have this big aha, and is it required that you're really intentional about it? In my felt experience at this moment, it's not required because we felt something so profound that already the shift had happened, and so uh we can return to the like and witness, like for me, this theme of self-trust throughout the week. But also, even if I hadn't built that pattern, it was already happening and moving.
Mm.
Or
Yeah.
even if I hadn't noticed the pattern, I mean, it was already shifting and happening. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't know if that's necessarily true for me. Like I didn't like
Yeah.
I could see how that like unfolded for yeah. And so
Yeah,
um
that's why I want to be really careful. Like that's my felt experience in this moment. And there have been other chapters of my life where I felt like, oh, I really want to keep a hyper focus on this so that I can allow it to integrate. And I like, so I don't think I've had experiences all across the spectrum. So
yeah.
in this moment, my experience is like, oh yeah, it already happened and it's unfolding. But I don't think that,
But
yeah,
I'm really
go ahead.
curious, do you think that you were having these moments of like needing to trust yourself because somewhere you had like built those, somehow you had attracted those situations into your life because you knew you were doing this work? Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I think I absolutely like I mean my felt is like we kicked off something in that conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
then and then I had and then it was like, oh, Dummy is deciding she's gonna. That's how I refer to myself sometimes.
Mhm.
Anyway, like with like all like loving and German,
Totally.
right? Like oh, Dummy's deciding she's gonna listen to herself. Great, let's give her all these opportunities to listen to herself and see what she does with it, right? And like one instance was my body, which has been screaming at me for like I don't know 6 months, 5 years to stop eating gluten. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll fucking listen, right? And so like that was one of like listening to the body, and then another was like yeah, anyways, there were like lots of big and small moments that were about like listening to myself and acting on that.
So I'm like getting totally lit. First of all, can we just sidebar for a second? We don't have to get into this whole conversation, but I would love to learn about or talk like at some point, even if it's off the record, hear about your experience with not eating gluten and that whole journey. Though
I am, yeah, actually, I would actually love to have someone come on who, so if listeners know anyone who's like real magic in medicine, the world is about listening to the body, because that's such a growing relationship for me. So yeah, I would love to talk about the body in that way.
Yeah.
I'd be on board.
Yeah.
It's new. I will say I'm finally listening, and the body's like, thank fucking God we were really cranky.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's a conversation I would love to, because I think it's such an important piece. It's something that I love talking about, I think is what I'm trying to get at. Okay. But anyway, that was a sidebar. So I'm like laughing in my mind as you're talking about these situations that have come up in your life to allow you to practice the self-trust, is because it is 100% happening in my life too. I just like didn't connect them, even though now it's so obvious to me. How did I not even see it?
Well, I only saw it like, that it was connected to our podcast conversation 30 seconds ago.
Okay.
So
okay. Well, all right then. Well, see, this is why it's so good that we're having a follow-up, because I think it like puts things into perspective.
And also this is why this work, again, I want to use it the same like kind of lightness that you are, is so beautiful to do in partnership, right? Because you can witness things to each other, and you can discover things in conversation. And so instead of it feeling kind of like you and your journal, it's just much more dynamic and helpful.
Yeah.
I think if you can have a partner in crime.
Oh, totally. So I think the thing that's been coming up for me is that I'm currently in, Taiwan still. And I will tell you, this happens every time. I still have not yet learned, but every time I travel somewhere, I think I'm going to be able to get more work done than I actually can.
Yeah.
Every time. It's like, I've been doing this for years now, and you would think that I would get it by now, but I'm always like, no, I have 2 months in Asia. It's going to be fine. Like,
do the same thing.
Yeah. And so what's been happening is I've been doing the minimum amount of work required in terms of like things that have deadlines or client calls. And then everything else I've just been like having to let go of. And I need to just trust. That like, is this going to be okay? Is this going to work? Is this going to be safe? Am I going to be financially secure? Like all of these things. And it's the same thing with our podcast. It's this direct freaking parallel, because it's this idea of like, yeah, basically, can I trust? Can I be safe? Like that kind of thing. And I don't know if I'm doing a good job, to be very honest, of remembering that like I don't have that. I don't know if it's going to work, but like also trusting and all that stuff, because it really feels like a toggling. That's the word that I always use, or like a vacillating between one consciousness and another, or one mindset and another, one remembering and then a forgetting. It just feels like a constant, like that's what it is. It's literally like I remember and I'm like safe, whole, all good, happy, relaxed, joyful. And then something in my reality comes up, and then I start like forgetting, like an email that says like, hey, you need to like do this thing. I'm like, and so I think what you're reminding me of is every one of those things that's popping up in my hologram, in my reality, is the opportunity where I can choose whatever path I want. Do I want to go back into, scarcity, or do I want to trust?
Yeah. And yeah, right. So right, we set the intention by having the conversation, and then the path appeared, which is like, great, okay, here's the playground where you can practice this new thing. You're this like this new like the
Mhm.
image that I have is like literally like a kid on the jungle gym, right? And like doing the monkey bars is
Yeah.
like, okay, great. You said you wanted to learn monkey bars. Here we are. And now
Mhm.
you can play, and you might fall 20 times, you might make it across the first time, but
Yeah.
like it's a playground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that's really important to note because um I think sometimes people being I can take this work way too seriously. And it's like, uh, I also think there's this idea that people are like, the universe is testing you.
Oh yeah, I hate that so
I
fucking
hate
much.
that so much. Like,
There's no pass or fail.
yeah, this is a test. It's like, that is an terrifying, awful, super constrictive way to live if you just believe that you're being
Yeah, I
tested all the time.
really, 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 really hate that language. Yeah, the universe is testing how bad I really want it. Like, no, you just created an opportunity for yourself to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if you, if, yeah, anyway, I could go down a
Yeah.
whole soapbox rabbit hole. I will refrain from. But the me who hates the term self sabotage also hates the idea that the universe is testing you.
Mm-hmm. Ooh,
It
that's
feels
a
like the
whole.
same thing. It feels like the same thing that's like the like like I thought we're all interested in this like universe instead of using God language because we are trying to kill off this Judeo-Christian God who's like up in the sky judging everybody. Isn't
Mm-hmm.
that what we said we didn't want? Like, so why would you create the universe in that same image?
Uh-huh, exactly. Exactly. Well, it's because it's so hard to escape. It's because
Yeah.
whether we like it or not, it's ingrained in us that we believe that we have to
Yes.
be punished.
Yes. I'm also laughing at myself because I literally just talked about us creating the universe in the image that we're desiring,
Uh-huh.
right? Like how fully baked is Kyley in the idea that we are infinite creator that like I'm casting us as creating the universe, which is actually what I believe, right?
Right.
Rather
Yeah.
than, yeah, anyway, I'm just amused at
I'm like, yeah,
myself.
of course.
Yeah. Like, when you like, you say something and you're like, oh yeah, I really internalized that idea, right? It doesn't
Uh-huh.
feel like it's
Mhm.
not a costume I'm trying on. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, anyway. Okay. But the question I wanted to ask you though, if you felt comfortable talking about it, are there like particular like felt experiences or stories around the like or a particular moment to speak to around the like, oh, will it be safe if I don't do all the extra doing?
Mm, God, like so many. Like, you mean like concrete examples?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Um, okay, hold on. I feel like I should be able to lift
And
this
the
I have
reason
on.
I'm asking is because I
Mhm.
wonder if we look at a specific example, if we might be able to like use it to go a little deeper. Because I was really struck by the idea you were talking about like toggling back and forth between
Mhm.
these two,
Mhm.
which instantly makes me think of like, I talk about parts work a lot, right? And that there's like a part of like, so there's a part of you who's fully on board with trust, and then there's a
Mhm.
part of you who doesn't trust.
Mhm.
And potentially there could be something really interesting if you were up for it. I guess I'm basically asking if I can coach you live on
Yeah,
our show
always. Always.
by like diving into a deep enough into a story to discover like what is going on for the part who doesn't want to unhook and trust. What
Okay,
do they
awesome.
need? What
Love
does
it.
that
I
make
would
sense? Yeah.
love to get coached
Yeah.
around this. Okay, so give me a second to think about because I almost want to say it almost feels nebulous. Like it's just it's almost like a low grade background noise sometimes, not necessarily rather than like a okay, but let me think. 'Cause I'm sure I could.
Which also makes sense because you're like far enough into this that it's not the front facing noise, right?
Mhm.
It's like this, it is the subtle background noise, but also you have enough self awareness that you're like, it would be really nice if I could turn off the background chatter. Yeah.
Well, in my opinion, I think the self back like that background noise is actually a little bit more um even more important to look at because what happens
Mm,
is like I clarity or and even like liberation is bringing something from the unconscious to the conscious,
mm,
and
yeah, that's a
so
very, yeah,
there's
yeah,
something almost really tricky when it's super low grade, right? Because then you don't um
yeah.
it can be just like yeah tricky.
Insidious. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me think. What is my overall like thought here? Okay. Sorry. Okay, Jennifer, there's a long pause. You can edit that out. I think my general overall thinking, and it's funny that I haven't even looked at it yet, but it's not that I'm not getting the things done that I need to get done, but it's more of this idea of like, I am more normally my life is that I'm really focused on my work, and I have like I can be like really present with it. And now that I'm in Taiwan, my work is secondary. I would even say, is it secondary, even third dairy or fourth dairy? It's just like not as high on the
Mm,
priority list. And so therefore I'm not like, mm, that's not even true. Like I'm not giving full attention to this next program that I want to create. It's just like in limbo, and I'm just kind of like, whatever, like I'll work on it when I feel like working on it, when inspiration strikes. And if I don't want to work on it, that's like, actually, not only is that okay, like that's great, because if I can just be in joy and doing what I love to do, like that's honestly the most important thing to me. Like, can I just, am I enjoying my life? But I'm not like working on this project at all. So I guess I'm thinking like, so then the insidious part goes like, oh, but your energy isn't fully behind your job right now. And you don't have any time to work on this program that you're actually like pretty excited about. And it just feels like everything's falling away to the wayside. Does that make sense? So I don't even
yeah.
know if it's like one specific thing. It's more just the idea of like, yeah, I'm not like promoting anything, which is also like fine, by the way. But it's just this idea of like, wait, but I guess not. See, you can even like, I even feel
Yeah.
contradiction here. I'm like, I was about to say, which is fine. I'm like, but is it fine? I guess it's a question.
I've
I'm like,
realized
I don't know if
I've
it's
realized
fine.
when I say I have realized that when I say which is fine, I've realized that that's actually a huge tell of mine, that I do not think it's fine. So if you ever hear me say which is fine, just know that I am full of shit. And it's
I
actually become really
love
helpful,
that.
because now when I say it, I'm like, oh
Totally.
no, that's apparently it's not fine.
I guess what I'm saying, that's why I love it, because it's pointing actually to the truth, which is like, it's not fine. So but it's
Some part
so,
of you doesn't think it's fine. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So and this is where the insidiousness is really like tricky, because I actually on one hand think that it's fine, but on the other, just I'm almost like, I don't even know that I don't think it's fine. I guess
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say. I don't
Yeah.
know. I didn't know until you pointed out to me that obviously I didn't think it was fine, because I wouldn't be asking this question if I thought it was fine.
Mm. Yep. 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 It's
And
funny that, oh, good.
I'm sorry. And just to like relate this back to the podcast, because this is also a conversation about, we want tens of thousands of listeners. I guess even the question that came up for me after our call was, I feel so good about this, right? Where we landed in our last call. But then, as you know, we like, when maybe we'll get into it, we like found this expert on Instagram who like was like, I signed up for his email list, and he was like, these are all the things that you need to do. And immediately my body was like, blah, blah, like, don't want to do any of those things. But my mind was like, but if we don't do those, does that mean that we're like not going to grow? I'm like, I don't want to do them. I'm almost like, I don't want to. So that's not even an
Yeah.
option. But also, does that mean then we're
Does that mean I have to?
fucked? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Okay. Oh, there's so many things I want to say. The first thing that, though, before we talk about the guy's Instagram ad, that was what, because Instagram totally listens in on all your conversations. So I instantly, like 20 minutes after we finished recording, had an ad that was like, do you have a podcast and you'd like to grow it? You know?
Yeah.
So what was I going to say? Oh, but before we do that, I wanted to go back to your story of like, the business is not the primary focus. And like, is that okay? And the image that kept coming in my mind as you were talking was like you having a house plant and feeling like, which I know you have many, and feeling like I have to sit here and watch it grow. And if I look away, it will stop growing.
Yes. I'm actually like writing some of this down, something down that yeah. It just basically, what I essentially just said was that like, it feels unsafe for me not to be looking at my business all the time, which is insane, because that's the exact opposite of what I want. Like the very thing that I'm going for is the ability to not look at my business all the time and still have things work smooth like butter.
Oh my God, I relate to that. That feels like exactly the place that I am in also. Like I will have time, and we were actually talking about this a little bit and with a recent guest, that I will have these pockets of time where it's like I don't have to do any work and I don't have to be in mom mode, and I kind of like, I'm actually not very comfortable. I'm like, my whole life is ordered around those two demands, and I'm confused. Even as I have been claiming that I want other things to start taking a priority, the space shows up for those other things, and I'm like, I don't fucking know what to do with this extra 45 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, like, so what I think is like the flip side of the coin, like what you're saying is like, if I'm not looking at the business, will the business be okay? And I share that. And then the other piece of it for me is like, and like, what the fuck do I even do with myself if I'm not looking at the business? If I'm not, to the houseplant metaphor, looking at either my kids or the business to make sure they're growing.
Yeah. What do you look at?
Yeah.
If anything at all. Okay.
Yeah.
So can we like, I love that you sort of organize those two things separately for me. So yeah, I want to talk about both of those things.
Yeah.
One at a time.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay. Can we start with my thing, that thing about, because I feel like it's just
Yeah,
going
yeah.
in order.
Yeah. I got so jazzed about how that feels like exactly my problem that I'm like, well, I don't fucking know the answer to it because it's my problem too.
Well, okay. So I already know, like, what's already coming up for me is like, oh my God, like, I'm so happy that we're having this conversation, because I think sometimes awareness in itself is just, super helpful. And I didn't know that I was doing that. I didn't know that I was like harboring what felt like a subtle, but actually quite insidious, like quite pervasive belief of like, okay, I'm not totally focusing on my business. Is that safe? Is that dangerous? Is that dumb? Is that irresponsible? Like, well, it feels so uncomfortable. That's really what it is. It just feels like, wait, can I do that? It feels uncomfortable. So, and then
Which
I'm
is
like,
also ironic because I feel like a big draw of entrepreneurship is like, you own your time, you can do whatever you want. And then you're racked with like guilt and fear that if you look away for a second, the baby's going to tumble down the stairs. Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if it's as easy as like, oh, okay, yeah, I see that I have that belief now. And I'm like, I don't know, shining a light on it somehow in like a playful, loving way is allowing me to be like, oh, I see what I'm doing now. I don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to oversimplify because I know it's not always that simple, because sometimes you have to go in and excavate some stuff. But I'm like, if I want to live a life in which I believe that I can, that's because this is what I want. I want to, like, in my ideal situation, my business runs on its own without me even needing to like be in it. You know what I mean? Like, not completely. Obviously, I still have to like, I'm the core of it, but there are things, whether it's like my team or source.
There's an infrastructure that supports you.
Yeah. But when I say infrastructure, I don't necessarily even mean on the physical realm, like even in like in the spirit, like the etheric, energetic, spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And because I actually do believe that, by the way, maybe this is very clear because I guess I haven't said this, but like my belief is that when you are in full alignment, things come to you. Like, I think this is like, I don't know if this is a projector thing, but I think, or, like, meaning you don't have to effort. And it's not like, it's like, and this has happened to me, by the way, before, which is why I know it's possible when suddenly it's like, I don't know, like 3 clients just popped up. Like,
I think the important thing to that is that alignment is, to me, it's the alignment of our desire, right? Because sometimes people would make alignment of like, oh, I'm doing the right thing, right? And therefore, when it doesn't work, they're like, oh no, what am I doing wrong? Right? That's like a big story. A lot of my clients, we hash out. It's like, like, what am I doing wrong? And I think alignment is just fucking desire. And then the stories that you have in between, like standing between you and the thing that you want, right? So like, I want 2 new clients. Like, is that actually a want, or is that a thing you think you should want? Is the first differentiator. And then the second differentiator is like, are there any stories standing between me and those 2 clients? Like, oh, I want 2 more clients, but subconsciously I'm afraid that if I let people in there take up too much of my time, and so I don't actually want to sign any clients. So anyway, just to clarify, because I do think it's, to me, alignment is desire and beliefs.
I see. Yeah, because I was gonna have you explain that a little bit more. What you meant when you said, to you, alignment. What do you mean when you say alignment is just desire? Meaning alignment is being really clear on your desire and letting it be.
To be in alignment means to be moving with what you actually want, as opposed to what you think you should want.
Okay. Yeah.
As opposed to some like external, like, oh, the universe, I'm like, where I'm doing the thing, I'm in my purpose, I'm supposed to be helping people, and here I am trying to help people, and why isn't it working? I must be doing something wrong. It's like, well, maybe you don't actually fucking want that offer, right? Maybe you're selling an offer that you don't actually want to be doing because it's underpriced or asking too much of you or kind of boring because you've been doing it for too long, or like, and so maybe it's not, the problem is like, I guess I just think sometimes when people talk about alignment, they talk about it a lot as if it's like what they're supposed to be doing from like God or the universe. And I think real alignment is like, what do you fucking want?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is like, to me, alignment is, I think we're saying the same thing with different language. And because what I heard you say that like really like was a aha moment was like, to me, alignment is sovereignty, which is I think what you had just explained, meaning being really not acting from a place of truth. That's like the best way that I can explain. Meaning, so you're not doing something because you think that you're supposed to, but you're also not avoiding something because, or resisting something because of you're afraid or some like, you know, false story. So alignment to me is like, I don't know. It's almost, I can't even, it's for me, it's like a feeling. I don't even know if I have the language for it, but I kind of lost my train of thought. What were we talking about with alignment? Where were we that at before we got it?
Sidetracked. You were saying like when you're in alignment, like things can just show up. Like, okay, 2 clients like showed up, and then I went on this big tangent because basically because I don't want people gaslighting themselves and like beating themselves up that like, oh, like it's not happening for me, therefore I'm out of alignment and I'm doing something wrong. And I think if it's not happening for you, it's because you either are acting on something that you don't fucking want to be doing and you're so twisted up in shoulds and external expectations, or you just have a bunch of bullshit stories about what you think you're actually allowed and, you know, how money subconsciously works for you.
Totally. I mean, I think I'm really happy you pointed that out because I think that's really important. I think I definitely fall into this camp all the time. And I will also say that I think alignment is like, when I think back to like, okay, I was saying like clients just come in when I'm in alignment. I think what I mean by that is like when I am like just really fucking free and present and like enjoying my goddamn self. Like,
yes. Okay, I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you. But
no, go.
This is so beautiful. You're saying like clients just show up when you're just enjoying yourself. And the fear is, here I am just enjoying my life, not focusing on my business, and oh no, everything's going to fall apart. How fucking gorgeous is that? We're so insane as human beings.
Well, that's okay. So you just brought it full circle for me, because what my like awareness I think has helped me do is being like, oh wait, I just want to enjoy myself. And so it is the belief of like, can I just enjoy myself here and like, and then get clients or get whatever my desires, whatever my want is. And I think the point that I'm trying to make is it's as simple as that. Instead of work, like, I don't, maybe you can help me like articulate what I'm trying to say. Like, by naming that is what I'm doing, then it's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to fucking enjoy my goddamn self is what I'm saying, that's my practice. So you were talking about like, you have this practice now of trusting yourself. My practice is to go fully ham on enjoying myself because I want to. And and like really allowing that and having fun. And I think, and also like, there's more that goes into that when I say like going ham on having fun. But I mean, like, being really present with it and remembering what it feels like in my body when I am having fun, and like integrating that into a place of like, oh, this is safe. Like, and being completely embodied in that, I guess is what I'm saying. Having an embodied experience of being, of having fun and enjoying myself. And continuing to come back to that when the story, like, when I start to do the toggling thing that I was talking about. But I don't know if there's a lot of work that I need to do around the toggle, like when I start to feel like the fear. Sometimes I think there's some work that needs to be done around like why do you feel the fear? But I think for me right now, this conversation is actually helping me with that. It's just being like, trust. I just trust.
Okay. I'm so excited. Okay. So you're pointing out for us this like delicious paradox where when you are just having fun, you're in alignment and clients show up. And also the fear is if I'm just having fun, everything will fall apart and I won't get what I need.
Yes.
I wish you guys could see my face because I'm making nut job faces. Because like that right there is literally the paradox of our experience as human beings, which is like, I just want to enjoy my life. But if I actually stop worrying, thinking, controlling, and enjoy my life, everything will fall apart and I won't be able to enjoy my life. Like that's it, right? That's that's like why, the Buddha sat under a fucking tree, right? Like that is everything we do that is insane.
Yeah.
So I just am very grateful for you pointing that out. And this is where I want to talk about joy and death.
Okay. Yeah.
I knew we were going to get to it.
Cool.
So, a couple weeks ago, I mentioned like towards the end of an episode, something about this relationship between joy and death that my friend Kelly McGuire, future podcast guest, had like helped me. She'd helped introduce to me. And I haven't stopped thinking about it. I mentioned it to Eva, and then Eva also hasn't stopped thinking about it. So, this comes from like, really beautiful, complicated theory. And so I will do like I will fuck up explaining this. And also it will get us kind of in the direction we want to go until Kelly comes on and like actually, tutors us properly. Okay. So in moments of joy and ecstasy, the self dies. When you are completely immersed in the present and enjoy and experiencing that kind of embodied joy that you were talking about, which I think we could also call ecstasy, the ego is not, that's why that experience is so delicious and delightful, right? It's because the ego has fallen away. It's like, it's your present, and therefore your being and the thinking and the whirling and the controlling has just like either faded or faded back or, like fallen away.
Dropped off. Yeah.
Dropped off. So in order to experience joy and ecstasy, so joy and ecstasy are when we feel most alive, right? Like that's when we feel most alive. And in order to feel most alive, we have to experience death because it's the death of the like big eye, like, the big eye control the eye self, right? So even as we are craving ecstasy and presence and joy, we are also fucking terrified of it because it's death. And so that like constant like twisting, turning, churning of like, I just want to enjoy my life. Is it safe to enjoy my life? Well, no, it's not safe because you have to die in order to enjoy your life. And also you are living in perpetual not life when you're holding on to the eye. Does that make sense?
It does, but yes. And so this is where we can get into like the philosophical, psychological. So I 100% agree with everything that you're saying. And I want to continue. I want you to continue to expand on this because I think there's like more, but I think what you're pointing to is the reason this is insanity. This is what people like spiritual teachers talk about when we're like, we are insane. Like humans are an insane speed. Like being enlightened, that's sanity. Cause that's just like, that's where things make sense. anything before enlightenment is insanity and illness and sickness.
And what's fascinating is as we like start to trip into the place of like, oh, there could be a different way, that's when we start to think, oh, I must be insane, I must be losing my mind. I mean, how many times have we talked about that on the show?
Totally. Oh my God, I'm so happy that you're pointing that out. That is hilarious, and also such a helpful reflection, because I'm always afraid of like losing my mind, but actually I'm actually, what if I was actually going closer to sanity?
Right. And actually maybe that's what the fear is, right? Is that like maybe it's your own version of this kind of joy death paradox thing of like like there's like a, I don't know, insanity paradox for you.
Right. Yeah. But
Yeah.
what I was going to point out is that you're talking about how it's, you know, joy is, what did you say, like our, when we're the most alive. And you said you said it's not safe to die and have our ego die, but really in reality it's actually not safe to not let our ego die. Like it's actually more unsafe to do the thing that we're all doing, and that is the irony behind all of this.
Yeah, right. It's actually, and also like that like constant restless urge that we all have is the urge to let our ego die and be in joy and ecstasy. Yeah, even as it's the thing that we are kicking and screaming the whole fucking way too.
Okay, so this is really interesting. You talked about how this is like an academic thing, and you came prepared with like notes and stuff. But it's so funny because this is actually what I talk to my clients about all the time, not from an academic point of view, which I think we've talked about on the podcast before, which is the realization that I came to, which is that we all want to be free, but when we get to freedom, we fucking freak out, and we can't. It feels too dangerous, too delicious, too everything, too much, and then we go whoa,
vulnerable.
Yeah, and we like totally fucking pull back. And I see this happen all the time. And the irony is that, and I, you know, if I were back at home in America, I have this like quote on my wall. It's like, the thing that we want is actually on the other side of what we fear most. Like it's that doesn't sound that profound now because we all kind of know that, but there's more to that quote. But I've just experienced that so many times where I get to the edge and I'm so afraid, but actually like on the other side of this wall of the edge is actually the very thing that I want, that I'm most afraid of.
And also, I think we pull back and then we create a lot of shame and story about how we shouldn't pull back.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, that's so, I mean, even just like I'm just thinking about like when I go to the beach, and I live in New England, I love the beach. And so like you go to the beach in June, the water's still freaking cold, you know? And I mean, I've gone swimming in April, so I'm a nut job, but like, you know, you like put your feet in and then you kind of like jump out and then you like walk in a little bit further and then, you know, and then the wave comes that hits your crotch. You're like, oh, God damn it. Right.
Love this analogy.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. Yes, on some level, I think we are like, I know I get really impatient with myself to just be just fucking jump in the water and be done with it. And also like, we are all playing this game of like a little bit in, a little bit out, a little bit in. And so to whatever extent, I don't know, if you're listening and you're someone who like comes close to your desired experience and then finds yourself pulling back, maybe just recognize that that's profoundly human and you don't need to beat yourself up for it.
Yeah. I mean, and actually, I think like I would actually argue that the more compassion that you can bring to yourself in that moment, the more you will like actually bust through like some kind of wall, because obviously we know this now, the judgment will then just further sink you down into a loophole of like the same shit of where you will get stuck. And like compassion, just all of a sudden it's just this weird thing that just like shifts your perspective, opens you up completely, and then you're all of a sudden met with like an infinite amount of possibilities of what can happen next.
And the thing that's funny is that sometimes compassion is like, I don't even know how to put this into words fully. Sometimes I think our judgment dresses up as compassion. Like this is like the high vibe only thing, you know? I think sometimes like the moment calls for compassion and we're like actually mean to ourselves, but we're doing it in a like quote unquote compassionate voice. You know what I mean?
Can you give me an example?
Okay, Jennifer, I'm going to pause for a second. Yeah, I think a really good example is like, I should be grateful. I hear this one all the time. Like, because gratitude we associate with like compassion and like, being like enjoying life. And so we will say like, oh, like putting in the context of business, like, oh, I got half what I was hoping to get this month, but I should be grateful. And instantly what you're doing in that moment is actually pushing away the voice that's saying, I didn't get what I want and I'm upset about it. And so that is a deeply uncompassionate response to the voice that is bitter or scared or hungry.
Yeah.
And so like we're in that moment using gratitude, which we put in a bucket of like, like a good thing, but we're actually using it to create more suffering and separation.
Totally. Yeah. I get it. That totally makes sense. Yeah. I think the gratitude thing, if there's ever a should, or if there's like a need to feel gratitude, those are pretty big red flags that that's not compassion.
I think which is fine is probably another, right? Like, our phrase, which is fine, is probably another, I should be grateful.
Right. So that's like our way of trying to soothe. I think what I hear you saying is like, that's a way of soothing ourselves, that we think we're soothing ourselves. And then we misinterpret that for compassion. And then, but that's when it's actually a problem, because it's not fine. And that's actually not helpful.
Exactly. And so like you're trying to soothe yourself, but you're actually rejecting yourself.
Got it. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. And compassion is always acceptance.
Yeah. I mean, compassion to me is very much a physical experience where the body suddenly feels actual relief. Like when I say, oh, it's fine, I don't actually feel release in my body.
Right.
Compassion to me is self-compassion and this is a Kristen Neff definition, it's just the best definition I've heard of self-compassion, but it's simply just kindness towards the part of you that's suffering.
Ooh.
And so when I think of saying something like, oh, I should be grateful, that doesn't feel like kindness to the part of me that's suffering. And neither does, oh, it's fine. Yeah. Like, so I think that's been really helpful for me in discerning like, wait, what is the compassionate response right now? And yeah, if it's kindness towards the parts of you that are suffering, it really means just like, oh, most of the time it's like, oh, can I be with this sadness?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like sometimes kindness is just the witnessing. My kids have this book, which I'm always interested in reading way more than they are. This is what happens. You get all these like really moving emotional books and your kids are like, I just want to read this one about the cookies all the time.
Yep.
So it's this book called The Rabbit Listened, which I highly recommend so that your kids can also not let you read it, but you'll love it. And it's about this little boy and like he is building this really, or actually gender neutral kid, and they build this like really gorgeous tower out of blocks and then it crumbles. And one after another, all these animals come and like one tries to fix the problem and one tries to make the kid laugh and one like tries to say like, oh no, isn't that terrible? And then none of it helps. And then eventually the rabbit comes along and just listens and just doesn't say a thing. The whole time the rabbit doesn't say anything. The rabbit just sits there next to this little kid and the kid cries and he yells and blah, blah, blah. And that's compassion.
Yeah.
Is like just not trying to, so there's not gaslighting and ignoring, but it's also not fixing. Like, yeah, you made half as much as you wanted this month. You feel a way about it. How do you feel? Maybe you need to go through the whole cycle of all the things that you feel, and your job is just to witness them, rabbit listen style, and then an answer will arise, but it's not fixing it either.
Totally. Yep. Yeah. So to go back to, what we were saying about having compassion for yourself is like when you are doing the dance with the ocean and you're getting your crotch wet and then you jump back out and all that stuff. It's like,
I hope that our audio clip this week is just that. It's just you talking outside of context. The 1 minute that goes on Instagram.
That done. That's what we should totally
done.
Okay, so
that doesn't make you want to listen to Hello Universe, really. Okay, sorry. You were trying to be serious.
Okay. Yeah, I'm already having a hard time with my train of thought. Don't make me laugh too much. So we want freedom or we want joy, but it feels scary because it does feel like death. And so I want to take that further and be like, okay, so what do we do there? But I am hearing you say, and what we've just unpacked is like, first start with compassion, because we're gonna do the toggling. Like, this is what I'm really talking about. The toggling that I was talking about, it's this. Right. So when I have a story that there's no right way to do it, it actually makes me relax, and then I can do it more.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm supposed to toggle is basically kind of what I'm, if I were to apply it to this scenario that we're talking about, like even with the podcast stuff, like, should I do an audiogram or should I just like be in belief? And I'm going to toggle between those two things. And it's okay to toggle, because that actually does help me relax and be like, okay, wait, I can not, I don't have to freak out about whether or not I'm doing it right or wrong.
Right. The toggling is not an indication that you're doing it wrong. It's just the insanity of our human existence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also think, okay, so there's two different directions. Well, the other piece to me to answer the like kind of joy death paradox is I also think we have to be willing to fucking die.
That's it. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted you to get to. Like what do you, what's your take on this, Caldwell?
I mean,
and I knew that's you.
The woman who has multiple clients calling her Queen of Shadows, and like literally one of my clients today sent me mail and wrote it Kyley Caldwell Queen of Shadows, and I was like, well, I am the happiest woman in the entire universe now. Yeah, so the Queen of Shadows wants to drag us all to death and kill us all off, right?
So what do you mean by that? Can you talk to me about like,
I'm trying to figure out, do I give you the swoopy metaphysical answer or
can we do both?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I think this is something you and I have talked about many times, which is like actually the point you just made of like, go into the place where you're afraid, right? Like when you come to the edge where there's fear, soften into it, right? Because what is fear other than like a marker of our fear of death, right? That's the ultimate fear. So like fear is always death. And so when you come to fear, like fall into it and soften into it and let it be okay. And that is, each one of those moments, I think, is its own kind of big or small death.
Can I just say, okay, so it's really important to me that I continue to bring this back to the examples that we brought up in terms of like podcast and also my own stuff, just because I think for context, right? So it's not just all up here.
Yes.
But even as you were saying that, I felt such, I felt such, I was very moved and was shown actually exactly what, like I have, what's the word I'm looking for? Let me think here. Okay, Jennifer, can you edit out that long pause? I just felt extraordinary love, I think is what I was hit with, because taking it back to my whole experience of like toggling between, can I have fun here and in Taiwan and still be safe, but I can, and then but the irony is that that's what I want and that's what I believe, blah blah. And when you were saying that, when you said like lean into the fear for me was like, oh, it's not safe if I'm not constantly looking at my business. And it's actually being like, oh, I can feel that fear. Like let myself, when I heard you, like what I interpret what you mean when you say like soften into the fear is like, oh, I feel afraid and it's okay to feel afraid. The answer is to not feel afraid. The answer isn't to be like, hey, let me shore myself up and get like into that intense bro energy of being like, oh, I'm a boss bitch. Like it's not that. It's like, oh, I'm afraid. And that's totally okay. That just seemed like such a kindness to me rather than all that other stuff. And so once I'm like, oh, I'm afraid, but can I continue even though now that I've acknowledged my fear and I'm actually holding it in loving kindness, I can actually continue to walk forward, like into the fear. Like that's the paradox of it all.
And I just love everything you said so much, including like to experience death is to experience love,
Mm.
because that is my felt experience. And I think what I also hear you saying, and like that shows up for me a lot, is like there's actually a wisdom in our fear, in that like it's us saying something, you know?
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
so what happens if you soften in and let yourself feel the fear? Like, I don't know, you'll learn something. I'm not, that makes it too like productivity oriented, but like,
No, I completely understand what you mean, because I think it's not like you have to. It's more of like fear, as we've talked about before, is really just like the little child within you that's telling you that like it needs something.
it needs something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm not talking about like, oh, like let's turn this into a lesson. It's like, hey, how can I show up to that little
Yeah.
person within me that's saying like, hey, can you help me?
Yeah. 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 And like most of us just want to be witnessed,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they don't want to be like fixed. It's cute. It's actually, this is something that I'm trying to like navigate, um, helping Desi understand. Um, for listeners, this is my 5-year-old. When his sister gets upset, he so quickly wants to fix it for her.
Mm-hmm.
He's really, really tender. He's very, very sweet, heart on his sleeve. Like his preschool teacher's constantly sending us messages of those like adorably sweet, kind things that he
Mm-hmm.
does. So his sister being sad makes him really sad, and he
Mm-hmm.
wants to fix that, right? And so the moment she gets upset, he's just like getting her stuffed animals and like
Mm-hmm.
getting up in her face and try. And she's the kind of kid
Mm-hmm.
who's like, I'm mad, I just need to be mad, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's
Totally. Yeah.
and also like, don't fucking touch me when I'm
Yeah.
mad, because
Mm-hmm.
half the time I'm mad because you just hit me in the head with a
Yeah. Yeah.
pillow or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And anyway, it's interesting observing. I don't know why I started to share this whole story, but like it's just interesting observing how much he wants to like fix the sadness rather than like let it be okay that she's sad. And it's interesting watching me try to like figure out how to like introduce that to him. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why I even started to tell you this whole story, but I don't know, there it
Oh
is.
no,
But
I'm happy we're going here because this is also my jam. Mostly because for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm really bad at it. And so I've like had to really work at it, meaning I grew up with a mom who like basically, even with Adam, it really shows up with my relationship with Adam. So he struggles with depression. We've talked about that before. And a huge problem is that I become the fixer, and then I want to just like go in and help. And as you said so eloquently, most of us just want to be witnessed. And the reason that I have noticed that it's that we do this is because, again, like you so perfectly pointed out, when Desi sees his sister being sad, it makes him sad. And so
yeah,
that's why we want to fix it, because we are uncomfortable with our own sadness. So when Adam is depressed, I want to fix it because his being depressed makes me uncomfortable. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like,
yeah,
so there's like such a direct correlation. Like, the most loving thing that we can do for people, we all know this now, is just to be present with them, to be with there without, you're saying, without fixing and without yeah, just witnessing, holding space for, and letting them have their experience. But the reason I think so many of us struggle with that is because it makes us uncomfortable. So the degree
yeah.
that we can let someone be free is actually how can we also feel our own shit. So like I feel like,
And
yeah.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think this is where like like learning how to like be with your own emotions and like emotional mastery, is what I call it, is actually why it's so important, because it allows us to be so much more kind and loving with the people around us.
Yeah, 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 I completely agree. And it's interesting because I can feel like witnessing Desi doing his thing. I'm like, oh, I know what that feels like. I was witnessing yourself, right? That's the thing that's wild about your kids. Is I'm like, oh, I do that. Like, yeah, I do the like, oh, let me like, if I do this, will it make you laugh? If I do
Mm-hmm.
this, like,
Mm-hmm.
can I corral this situation so that it feels safe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting. The place I want to go, which seems like a tangent, but I mean, this whole episode is a beautiful tangent, so I'm
Yeah.
just gonna run with it. Actually, unless is there something specific you wanted to say next? Did you have like an actual place you wanted to go?
I have it tucked away in the back of my mind that I
Go.
don't want to go, that forget about coming back to your thing, which was like 5 conversations ago, which is like, you're not looking at the plants. What do you look at? That whole conversation. Because I feel like we've just dived into this whole thing with my thing, but because I think I'm really good at closing loose ends. Like that's still a thing here for me, by the way, that I want to come back to at some point.
Thank you.
Other than that, we can go wherever.
Well, now I lost the thread of the other thing I was going to say. So,
well, okay. I will say though, sorry, and I'm going to just continue to play off this tangent. You've mentioned before that like Desi's like a very empathic kid, right?
Yeah.
And he's also a projector.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Did you know he's a projector? Anyway, I find that sometimes people who are really empathic tend to want to be fixers because it's difficult for us to hold our own, like, because we feel someone else's discomfort so much that we end up I feel like a lot of compassion. I understand why there's that like fixing it, but it really starts, I think, within like managing your own shit.
It's so interesting. I'm witnessing that a lot. Like he's even this new phase. No, not even that new, but it's been for the past couple of like 6 months or so. He doesn't want to watch movies because there's more conflict in movies, right? Movies tend to have like a bad guy or like, right. Whereas TV shows tend to be more like, they're more superficial. And he really actively doesn't want to watch movies. And we watch movies and he's like in hysterics and he loves it. And he's really happy. And for context, everyone, he loves screens and TV. But every time I'm like, oh, let's watch a movie. Like we watched Encanto because everyone's watched Encanto, right? It's a great movie. We listen to the music all the time. And then I'll be like, let's watch Encanto. And he like gets so uncomfortable because there's just the conflict is more dialed up and it's such an intense experience.
Totally. That's how it was with my nephew too. Like he just had his pillow, like he covered his face through most of the movie because the intensity of like not knowing if it was all gonna like be okay was too much for him to handle.
And this is movies we've already watched. That's what's fascinating to me. I'm like, but we know, anyway, I'm just trying to navigate it because like to your point exactly, like I can see that it's coming from like I don't want to feel uncomfortable. And also as his mom, I want to help him have access to being uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's I think the work, it isn't about, making him be like, telling him everything's going to be okay. It's about, hey, how can I hold you when you are feeling uncomfortable? And like, it's okay, like feel uncomfortable. And if your sister is sad, it makes you sad. Maybe we just need to be sad for 10 minutes instead of everyone being happy, and then seeing if that just like actually shifts everything though. You know what I mean?
That's actually a really good point because thank you. This is really helpful. I haven't actually pointed it out to him. When your sister's sad, it makes you sad. I have said it in terms of like, when people are sad, sometimes they just want you to sit next to them and you don't have to fix anything. And sometimes fixing things actually make people feel more uncomfortable. But I have actually still been phrasing it in terms of like what Birdie needs in that moment. That is a real gift. Yeah. And it somehow seems obvious. And thank you.
I mean, but not also, or at least this is an episode of things that should be obvious. And I, totally just over my head. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to close off that tangent about compassion, empathy. Where were we? Where were we? Oh yeah, no, we were talking about death and letting ourselves die. And like how, and I was like, Caldwell, what do we do? And you're like, well, we let ourselves die, and holding ourselves in that fear. I guess, was there anything else that you wanted to add on to that? Because I think you're right. Like we have to let ourselves die. That's so that. But how do we? Yeah, and I was like, and then I was like, how do we do that? If it feels scary, it's like, we'll actually just be with the fear. Yeah. But is it that simple? Is there more to that? Like, what is this? The concept of like letting ourselves die?
I think For me, the spiritual, like my journey of like spiritual expansion, honestly feels like it's really just about a willingness to be dead.
Do you
No,
mean like actual, like what?
I mean, probably ultimately, but um I feel like everything, like more and more, I feel like everything that I'm doing or have been doing is ultimately about, are you willing to go to the dark place and realize that the darkness is exquisite? Are
Mm-hmm.
you willing to like go to the place that seems like fear and realize that it's actually the portal to safety?
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to go to the place of death and recognize that that's where you get to live?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that sounds very philosophical, but also everything, whether it's like quote unquote limiting beliefs or like shadow work or inner child wounds, like all of these, or like the stuff you speak about so beautifully about like really being present with our emotions, like all of these are different ways of talking about like, can you let yourself be okay with death?
Yeah. I mean, so part of me is like, okay, like, yeah, we're done. But meaning like, but this is, I guess, okay. So because that's stuff that we talk about all the time. Like that's essentially, I think, what this whole, 'cause I feel like you're using the word death and fear interchangeably.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what all of, whether we like it or not, personal development is. Well, not
yeah.
all of it, but I think good personal development is
The
like,
good stuff, yeah.
yeah, it's like, what are we afraid of? Let's go and have tea with it. Like invite Mara in for tea
Mm-hmm.
and like have a conversation with her and be like, wait, what's going on? Inner
Mm-hmm.
child work, limiting beliefs, all of it. All of this is actually, I think, a very similar formula.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess I'm wondering, like, so when you say death, but I almost wonder if you're talking about it. So you said like there's these practical ways, and I'm wondering if maybe could you give us some examples of
Yeah.
maybe what's how that showed up in
Well,
your life when you talk
I
about.
yeah, and I will say one more thing too, which is like I also think it's about like it's also about a willingness to like let everything burn to the ground.
Right. So that's what I feel like you're like that. I want you, that's the piece that I want you to talk about
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah, like Ragnarok style, right? Like
I don't know. I only know,
oh,
isn't Ragnarok that movie?
yes. It's like in Norse mythology, it's the end of the world,
Okay. Okay. Oh, okay.
which is
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about Thor and Hottie Hodderson. Do you know what I'm talking about? Right? Wasn't that the Thor movie? Yeah, that guy, I swear, is like the hottest man alive. Anyway.
I am so glad we know your
Yeah.
preferences. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Um yeah, it's the well, yeah, because it is about the and it's about like, you know, Thor and end
Right.
of the
The end of the
world
world.
and
Right.
yeah. The whole Norse pantheon. Anyway, uh the how do I say this? Um okay, so Ragnarok is the end of the world. In Norse mythology, which I'm not actually super like fluent in, despite the fact that you know Loki's a constant chatterbox in my mind. Uh, it is it's like cyclical, so there's kind of always this sense of like the zoomed out big picture of Ragnarok is like, has it already happened? Does it live in the future? Will it definitely happen? Yes, all of the same, right? Which
Mhm.
is I don't know, just kind of a compelling idea. But like I increasingly feel like Ragnarok is our willingness to burn everything to the ground when we trip and fall into pain and resistance, like what here needs to die, right? So like let me pause for a minute, Jennifer, and think. Because I want to have an example.
Yeah. No, yeah, take your time. Because I was gonna say, just so you know, I am probably gonna ask you for an example because I feel like
Yeah.
we've come up against this conversation a lot often. But I think a concrete example would be really helpful for
Yeah.
me here, and so
Yeah.
I imagine it'd be helpful for our listeners too.
Okay.
Unless there isn't a concrete example, which is also fine.
All right. So joy and ecstasy is what we want, right? Our craving or desire is for joy and ecstasy. You could also say presence, but I'm saying ecstasy because I think it's it's bolder and it's a more felt experience, right? Uh the way that we get to joy and ecstasy is through death, right? As spoken previously, like the access point, like in order to have access to joy and ecstasy, you have to die. So Ragnarok is like really the story of death at the end of the world. We constantly, and our ego is the space of of the world that keeps us small, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we move through our world, we are constantly tripping into these experiences that you might call triggers, that you might call like resistance, where you like have this experience of discomfort. And there's an opportunity, if you witness what is happening, to let everything fall away. And the more willing you are to let everything fall away, this is the surrender. Like, and I will give an example in a moment. And to trust, like, I can let all of this die because the part of it that is joy, that is ecstasy, that is nourishment, that is like what I actually fucking want, that's not going to fall away. So the only thing that's going to fall away is the stuff that actually is keeping me trapped and feeling the experience of like a living death, when what I actually want is joy and ecstasy.
Right.
Does that like kind of as a concept make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Which, yeah, it makes sense to me. And I would say that to just play off of that, I think you've heard me say before this idea of like fear is pointing to falsehood somewhere. And so when you say something like what's actually only going to be left, like when you let the ego die and all that stuff die, what's left really is just all the good stuff.
Yeah.
And I actually believe that that's true. But I think, yeah. And I think this good stuff is actually what's true. And all the other stuff is like a falsehood somehow. And so I think that's I guess I just wanted to point out like, well, I don't know how I don't know. I want to just add just some supporting context for like why I'm with you. Like I actually think that what's left is what's true. And I think all that other stuff is false. This is why there's that Rumi quote that says like when you are close, like when you feel a peaceful joy, that's when you're nearer to truth.
Yeah. And I think we are afraid of losing the falsehood. Another way I think of that is that like what you're calling falsehood also to me I would call should, right? It's like all the ideas of like who I should be, how I should behave, what people like expect of me, and that those are all the places that like death, not the good kind, exists. And if you, because ultimately what Ragnarok really is like you bump into something that makes you feel fucking uncomfortable, and are you willing to kill off all of the should that exists in your world in that particular arena and just exist in what you want, just like fall deeper into your desire, because that's the place that ecstasy and joy and presence exists, and everything else is should. So an example might be, you know, maybe you have a relationship and maybe this relationship is really has turned a corner and is like actually really like exhausting and draining for you, even if the person is like an amazing human being. Maybe the relationship has just like fallen out of balance and in a way is like not nurturing and supporting you. And you know, so there's some inciting incident where you just like realize like, oh, this is a weight here, and you have a knowing that like this isn't working, and you could cover that back up and you could pretend that it's fine, or you could choose Ragnarok, which is to lean into the fear, to lean into the death, to lean into the destruction, and maybe you end the friendship, maybe you have a difficult conversation, maybe you recognize truths about yourself and how you are or aren't showing up, right? But you step into the quote unquote trigger with a willingness to let things die, which is different than, oh, I'm triggered and I need to fix something. It's like, oh, I have been made uncomfortable, so there's something here I have to I have an opportunity to let die. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I liked what you said about how you can go into it like not knowing what the outcome is going to be, but with a willingness
Yeah.
to let it die.
Yeah. And something needs to die. If you're uncomfortable, something needs to die. The thing that might need to die might be an old you or a story or a pattern, right? It might not necessarily be the relationship, but if you are if your discomfort is showing up, there's something that has to go. And most of us, because we are so afraid of letting something die, instead just cover it back up and choose then to cover ourselves back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna write something down. I think sorry, another long pause. I'm gonna just think for a second. Okay. I think maybe, I don't know if it still does, but does this still apply to podcast stuff and like business stuff? Because I think what you're saying is important. I feel like you're talking, I get the sense that you're talking about it in this more like grandiose way, but I'm understanding like, what I'm trying to say is I feel like this is what we're talking about all the time.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is how is this different from what we're already always doing? Or, you know what I mean?
I don't think it's different than what you and I are always doing. I think this is how you and I operate and walk through the world. Yeah.
I guess it's like, letting something die. We have to let something die in order to feel ecstasy, to feel what we want. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why. I feel like there's more here that I want to pull out, but I'm not sure what it is.
I know. I'm also feeling like I mean, on the one hand, I think this isn't like, yeah, I just think this is how you exist in the world. So I'm just using like a different language for something that already is.
Do you have any examples for how that's actually like happened in your life?
Yeah, give me a moment.
Okay. Because I feel like you talk. I feel like you talk about this all the time, and the reason I want to know is because I feel like every time it's like this rebirth, right? Yeah. It sounds just like this really beautiful experience, but I don't yet know what the experience has been.
So. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, off the air.
Off the air. Yeah. Let's just. I think this whole piece can be off the air.
Yeah. Maybe this could be on the air. It doesn't really matter. But like, I would say that moment when you were like, "Girl, we need to talk." I was a Ragnarok, right? It was like you being like, "This something is not working here," and we both had to like step into the arena with a willingness to, like, let something die, right? And I don't think either of us stepped into that thinking like, "Oh, the podcast or the friendship would die," but it was like we had to step into the space of like something
like something needs to change.
Not doing something needs to change. I'm trying. I'm feeling like so strong. Like I just want to like phone a friend, be like, Liz, just explain this better than me.
Well, because okay, so I think, do you feel that serves as a good example of Ragnarok? Like when we stepped into the, because if it is, like we can continue to go off of that, like to explore that. But to me, because I didn't see that as like we were at no point, like my perspective wasn't like, oh, let's have this conversation and I wasn't thinking of it in terms of like, oh, something has to die. To me, it was like something has to grow.
Mm.
That's the way that I perceive that.
Well, okay. So, okay. Continuing with the theme of off the air. So, Jennifer, we're off the air for a moment. At the same time, so you messaged me and we're like, girl, we got to talk. And at the same time, I had this friend, another friend who was like, I think I mentioned this to you, was
Right.
like,
Yeah.
you know, I think our friend, I have this like reservations or like hurt feelings in our friendship. And so it basically, I have this existing story that I'm, for exactly the thing that okay, actually we can talk. This can be our example. This can be our example. Okay.
All right. So let's just, Jennifer, we're going to start from here. And I'll start maybe like, can you give us another example? And then you can jump in. Okay.
So yeah. So Jennifer, there's a part a little while back where I said off the air. So if you could go back to the off the air part up until now. And then
okay, I think even before that, because there was a part of that where we were just kind of meandering and I like took a long ass pause. So
yes, use your brilliant editorial skills.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So can you give us maybe another example of how this death has showed up in your life?
Yeah. So I have an existing story. I had an existing story that love is conditional. I didn't know I had that existing story, right? So I have spent my whole life running around treating love as transactional. And so I have worked very, very hard at like being good enough for the love in my life, right? Like putting a lot of effort into being a good friend and and then also getting like wounded in particular kind of ways because I had this underlying story, right? And so I would like be exhausted by friendships sometimes because it felt like a debt to be repaid. Like if you love me, I automatically am like behind the 8 ball because I'm already unworthy of this, right? So in the same exact moment in 1 week, you and I started to have a conversation about like creating a different kind of equilibrium of like labor in the podcast and communication around that. And another friend of mine who's a truly beautiful person reached out and also wanted to speak about equilibrium in the relationship. And there was a third thing that happened that same week that I can't remember what it was, but it was like somehow all tied into this exact same theme, which was like ultimately all the way down under the surface was about like, can Kyley be loved unconditionally? And can Kyley choose how and when she shows up? Or does she always have to jump because someone else has asked her to jump? And that was a Ragnarok moment for me because it was pain. There was a lot happening. It was a soupy week.
Yeah, there's
right?
a lot going on with your relationships.
Yeah. And the opportunity for me was to just fucking swan dive in. Right. It was like everything is coming up, relationships and this old story. And so like, what do you want? And what do you think you should do? And can you kill the should and choose the want? And in so doing, like fall through to the other side.
Yeah. So in that situation, what died for you? Like multiple things. I'm hearing multiple things.
Multiple things. So I did let go of a friendship again with someone who is like a truly wonderful person, but it was just in this moment was not what serving both of us. I let go of all sorts of stories. And I also just like leaned into sorry, the words are falling away. Give me a moment. By being willing to go into the places that were really uncomfortable, I ultimately let go of the idea that I don't get to experience unconditional love. Meanwhile, for the record, my husband loves me unconditionally, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'd actually been shitty on multiple occasions because I refused to fully see that, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that I wasn't receiving unconditional love, it's that I couldn't
Believe
filter it
Yeah.
as such.
Yeah. Mhm.
And also I think this is doing a terrible injustice to what Ragnarok really is.
Yeah, because when you speak about Ragnarok, I feel like it sounds like you're talking about the end of the fucking world, right? Like
Yeah.
it seems like it carries the weight of like, let's fucking go.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Okay. That's it. Here's the difference between, for me, Ragnarok and other ways of moving through things is like, oh, are you getting like lessons or triggers or discomfort about what it means for you to be in relationship? Like, fucking go. Like, go in. Don't, oh, this is uncomfortable. How can I like patch this up? How could I fix this situation? It's like, there is something here. There is something here around how you, Kyley Caldwell, believe yourself able to show up in relationships. So fucking dive as deep in as you can, right? Don't try to fix the problem. Don't try to like move in small ways. Go as far in as you can to the most uncomfortable places, because then you get wherever the fuck you want to go the fastest. And where I got was literally a weepy conversation to you where I actually like understood that unconditional love exists.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, if I tried to like fix things or even tried to like shift in smaller ways, that we would have created an equilibrium around like podcast labor, right? And I would have had like a beautiful conversation with this other friend, and also like I wouldn't have received what I actually wanted,
Yeah.
which is a complete new understanding of felt love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, to me, yeah. I mean, yeah, it does make sense. I mean, I think it's actually now helping me better understand what you meant in the beginning when you're like, it really is your willingness, the degree of your willingness to really let things die. Ragnarok is, I think it sounds like the energy of how bold can you be essentially in letting things die off.
Yeah. And the bolder you're willing to be, the bigger the fucking experience of ecstasy.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't play small.
Yeah. Okay. I hear you. And I love this. And I do think that, yeah, I will say the thing about,
can I say one more thing?
Yeah. Oh yes, please.
No, you go. I'll say my other thing in a minute. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think this kind of boldness is interesting. I feel like we're almost saying we've said conflicting things, because sometimes what if you can't be bold, right? This goes back to like the ocean and the water analogy. Like maybe we have this idea, oh, like you listen to this podcast and you're like, okay, yeah, I need to go be bold now and like let everything die and burn everything to the ground. Oh, and then sometimes you can't do that. And sometimes you're gonna like need to like walk back and toggle between the two. And so I just want to make that I think that it
always begins with, it's almost like how, but here's the thing, it's how bold are you in your willingness to witness yourself.
Yeah.
That's really the boldness. The boldness is not like, like I'm gonna like, hustle my way to spiritual expansion, right? It's like, how bold are you going to be in witnessing the murky soup that is already living inside of you and just like letting it exist?
Yeah. I mean, that's my jam.
Yeah, this is why I'm like, of course it doesn't seem that radical to you, because it's literally how you walk around the world,
Yeah. I mean, in some instances, and then some instances I do the whole toggling, wet crotch dance.
That's the name of this episode.
Exactly. But I will say, what I am hearing you say though is that you're in a place, well, who knows, again, there might be like some vacillating, but I am witnessing and I have seen you model and demonstrate this boldness, because I think once we get to a place where we feel like we trust enough, where we've had enough experience, where we yeah, we can grow our capacity, I guess is what I'm saying, to the point where I think you can eventually sometimes get to a point where you're like, fucking Ragnarok, let's go. And it's safe for you to actually like let things burn from a sovereign place, not from a rebellious
reactionary.
fuck you.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And
yes.
so that's what I think that you're talking about, is like, I want to what's the word? Inspire people, or, yeah, to be bold where you can be bold. And I think that you can actually continue to get bolder.
Yes. And I think that because it's like you're building up a trust muscle that like, oh, it is, oh, okay, I keep being bold, and it keeps working out for me. So now I can like amp up the volume on my boldness. And I think the boldness is a willingness to really witness yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is a willingness to choose your own desire over what you think is required or expected of you. Those to me are the two like singular, if there were two things to take, like there's one thing to take away, it's like, how old are you in your willingness to witness your own felt experience, and how willing are you to kill should and choose desire?
Yeah. Woo. That was
okay. This is the other thing I was going to say.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because joy and death are intricately connected. Mm-hmm. Ragnarok is not the path to ecstasy. It is in and of itself ecstasy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? So death is not the portal that we have to pass through to joy. Death is
the joy.
Which is why earlier when I said, we have to be willing to die, and you were like, I just felt love, because death and love are actually the same thing.
I love this so much. I love this so much. And I'm lucky because I just had that felt experience. So I'm like, experience is like worth it, $1 million.
Right.
So
yes,
I totally can feel what you mean.
I'm going to give a plug for a moment. If any of this is either resonating with you or confusing the crap out of you or intriguing you, you should come to Magic Circle that Liz Simpson and I host, because that is the felt experience of whatever I'm fucking around and trying to explain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love it. Death is joy. Yeah, I hear you.
That felt really big to me, the moment that I was like, oh, it's not the means to the end, it is the joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The end of the world is ecstasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I totally, yeah. And I think I've seen this just carried out in almost every aspect of everything. Like, to me, honestly, this really, again, goes back to, I'm just going to say this until I'm blue in the face, because I know you've heard me say it a million times, but like, this is, reality is love, like, because it's room for everything. Meaning, like, it's the paradox of being with what is. To me, like, so meaning, let's say we experience pain. When we are with our pain, that's actually the very thing that brings us into ecstasy, which is what moves the pain.
Wait, break that down a little bit more for me.
So just for listeners, like, the context in which I understand this is oftentimes based in my work with meditation and Buddhism, and I think, this is a very Buddhist thought, which is this idea of, if we can love reality, like reality in itself, awareness in itself is love, because it is the space in which everything can exist. Everything exists, including being, so with our pain. It's when we are actually with our pain that our suffering then transmutes, dissolves, whatever, and then we experience whatever it is that we want to experience, which ecstasy is what you're calling it, but in that moment it could be love, clarity, peace, presence, all of that good stuff. So I think I said this because I think we landed on this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, yeah, this is what spirituality is for me. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. I mean, did what I just say make sense?
Yes. I didn't fully understand the first time, but yeah, like in sitting with the pain, you like
experience love.
Yeah.
So what you're calling death is what I'm calling pain, or, because you were using that word interchangeably with fear.
Yeah.
And sitting with the pain, which is exactly what I just did. I was like, oh, I'm afraid that if I like enjoy myself in Taiwan, I'm not gonna blah, 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 whatever. All these bad things are going to happen. And then I was like, oh, wait, but what's happening here? I feel fear. Can I be with that fear? The point isn't to make the fear go away. It's emotional alchemy. It's, oh, let me be with this. Yeah. This too belongs.
Yeah.
And I be with it. And then what I felt was love.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the additional piece is what part of this is what I want versus what part of it is what I think I should do. Right. So it's like the fear softens, and in that allowing, you can witness, oh yeah, my actual felt desire is to fucking hang out with my family in Taiwan. My actual felt desire is not to go like play around on Instagram. And I couldn't see it before because I was like I was too busy resisting fear, but because I softened into fear, then I could touch into my actual desire. And then maybe there's another fear, which is like, oh, but is it safe to choose my desire? And then you just soften into that. And it's like, oh, yep. Okay. And my desire is again to choose desire. Right. Yeah. I love that.
I love this work. Like, this is what's so fun for me about it, is that it's really a resistance of nothing.
Yeah.
It's
floating like a leaf in the void.
Yeah.
Like,
but a resistance of nothing, which goes back to the conversation that we had some time ago, which I also loved, of like, God, well, like everything is a paradox. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I feel like we could go down this loop-de-loop forever.
Yeah.
Was there something you wanted to say? Yeah.
2 weeks. Liz is coming on very soon. Liz is coming on the podcast, and she's the person that I am most like actively, hashing all this out with.
Yeah.
When I'm not hashing it out with you, but she's my Ragnarok partner. And so, this was like a teaser to Ragnarok.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, let's get it. I have a feeling it'll be interesting to have her share also on her experience of Ragnarok. Yeah, how that shows up in her life. Yeah. Okay. So, because this is how my brain works, I'm still from 10 conversations ago. I still have this one piece in my mind about. I mean, I just feel like we just went down a whole conversation about my fear of, enjoying myself and blah, 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 blah. And that was actually incredibly helpful. So 2 pieces I want to come back to, like, does this apply to the podcast? Because if you remember, it seemed like a lifetime ago, but the original conversation was like, how can we, grow this podcast?
Yeah.
How does this, for the conversation that we just had, apply? Like, is there something that we
wait, can I add something else? Yes. Okay. I think Ragnarok shows up when we are not in alignment. To go back to the piece we were saying about alignment, right? Like, things just like ease and flow shows up when we're in alignment. Ragnarok doesn't, like, wait, our podcast doesn't have these big Ragnarok moments because, like, this is we're acting from our desire. It's a thing we love creating. It's like, right. So I just think that's worth saying, because I don't think it's the project isn't to go around like blowing everything up and like looking for problems. It's like, if there is discomfort, if there is a sense of dis-ease, like, that's where you're out of alignment. And that's where like,
I see what you're saying.
and
Yes. It's only when there's a problem that you might be given the opportunity to decide if you want to let something die. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's, I think, super helpful to say. Yeah. Cause we don't need to go around looking for things that we need to blow up. It'll make itself
I
apparent.
mean, unless you think that's pleasurable, in which case fucking have at it, because there's no right or wrong.
Yeah. But I do think like, okay, but this is where my mind takes me, and I would love to know what you think about this. So after our last business meeting / podcast about how do we want to grow the podcast, right? We found that podcast expert who was like, you know, listing all the things that you can do to grow your podcast. And I could tell in my body immediately that it made me feel contracted and overwhelmed. And I didn't want to do any of those things. So my boldness wants to say, fuck that. Like, let that all burn to the ground. Like, this is what some experts saying, but like, am I willing to let that all burn to the ground? I guess that's what kind of a question there. Is that what can die? And also, because that does feel like a bold move to me. It's essentially saying, hey, let me like throw away what all the experts are saying that we should do and just do what I want to do.
Okay.
And I will tell you that makes me feel a little bit like, if not uneasy, delusional.
Oh, here we are back to the crazy
going back to the crazy. And then it's like, oh, wait. But maybe that's a sign that I'm actually becoming more sane.
Yeah.
What if that actually means? But by the way, I share all this also wanting to get your opinion on like, are you on the same page? Do you feel the same way? Or are you, maybe you don't have these such strong feelings, like such strong triggered reactions around strategy stuff.
Yeah. Well, I do think maybe because you know, I have so much, maybe because I have a lot of time in the like business coaching and then corporate business world. I feel like I do feel a kind of sovereignty when I engage with people talking about strategy. So I'm not that likely to get that contracted feeling because I have a pretty clear sense in my body that's like, I fucking know how I get to grow my business. And so I can listen to your ideas and
know only what's for you and what's not
and
for you.
And only take what I want to.
Which is good, which is why I want to run this past you, because I don't want my triggered reaction to limit us to maybe some really good idea.
So this is something so juicy that came out of a client session tonight that I will share. So we talk about desire. Okay. So desire, the moment you want something, it exists, right? And like the whole, like all of the creative universe, you're wanting
makes it, creates
you want it, it exists. And we've spoken about this on the podcast before. And then we create for ourselves the experience of time and space and like the process of unfolding of it, getting there. We often think about that in terms of steps, or in business, we think about it in terms of strategy, but really the only that exists energetically is desire and play. Desire is what I want, and play is how do I want to get there. So the question is, we already know what we want. 10,000 listeners, tens of thousands of listeners, they already exist. So then how do we want to get there? Like, what is the playful way that we want to create our 10,000 listeners? And we could decide that the playful way is that we just don't do a damn thing and they arrive. And we just, and then we might have some actual Ragnaroks that show up, right? Like maybe you have, like, maybe we speak that into existence. You know, we don't want to do a damn thing. Tens of thousands of listeners, boom. Well,
that's kind of, that is what I'm saying, by the way. That's what I'm saying. If I haven't made that clear, I don't want to do a damn thing besides be in like fun conversation with you and like have these kinds of mystical conversations. And then I just want it to like happen.
Yeah. I like the like like Rube Goldberg building of like, the steps. So,
Okay. Do you
so,
though? Do you actually like those steps? Because
this is a question I've been asking myself more and more, how much I like it and how much I think it is required. So I'm willing to recognize that 6 months from now, I'll be like, that's hilarious that I thought I liked building the steps.
Because by the way, I also want to say, like, I relate to that because for so long I identified as someone who was really good at planning shit, and it was very much an identity that I had. So, and I say this to say that I don't know why I said that. I think I wanted to make a point. What was my point? My point was that
if you've been doing something for a really long time, you can think, well, I'm good at it and therefore I enjoy it. But you might just actually be,
exactly. Or more, I just wanted to point out the conflict that I feel within myself sometimes too, where I'm like, oh, but sometimes I think I do actually like it. And I'm still learning to discern, because I think there is sometimes a real gratification, like, and a real fun in being like, oh, let's come up with like a way that makes sense to me of how this can be done. I feel really gratified in that sometimes. So I don't want to totally dismiss it, I guess is what I'm saying. But if I had my choosing, if magic existed in the way that we talk about, I wanted it to just like be, yes, believing, choosing, declaring, deciding, and then boom, that's it.
Yeah.
That would be my ultimate preference.
Yeah. And I will confess, I think my immediate like felt reaction is like, oh yeah, we can grow the podcast that way, but tens of thousands of listeners will require extra. I can feel that. Okay. Noting.
Interesting. I mean, the way that I'm seeing is like what I'm talking about is already bananas. So why not? Why wouldn't it work for 10,000?
Yeah. Well, and also like, what the hell is that? I mean, I talk about this in alchemy. Like, there's my money and mindset course. There's no difference between $5 and $500,000. It's actually exactly the same thing, right? So it's amusing to me that I'm like, oh, of course we could like quadruple our listeners, but like if we want, if we want Oprah's level, no, we already established you want to retain some anonymity. So. I forget what I was gonna say though.
We were talking about steps, and you're talking about like, do you actually like the steps or?
Yeah. So anyway, like if the step is wrapped up in should, it's not play, and therefore it's actively working against you.
Yeah.
So should is the energy of like that, like living death we were talking about. Like should is the energy of like not actually being alive.
Living death. I love that.
Yeah. And so like so one of the things that I think is, oh God, there's so much I could say about this topic. I think I want to write an entire book about should.
Please do.
Because the thing that's really fucking great about when you start like diving into and picking apart the way should shows up in your life and just being willing to like kill it off is there's all sorts of things that you are doing that you don't actually fucking want to do because you think you should, but there's like a million of them, right?
I'm like cringing right now because I can already tell that like there are probably some things that I'm not even aware of yet.
Oh, for sure. Me too. Then there are all these things that you might actually want to be doing, but you're not because of should. Because
and sovereignty is in the middle.
Sovereignty is in the middle. Yeah. Like it occurred to me today, I think I should take my kids outside because it's good for everybody. Also, it's pleasurable. Also, but because I think I should do it, there is instantly resistance.
Yeah, because oh God, one of my favorite quotes, this is a Tom quote. Where there's force, there's resistance. Like that's just it's so noticeable.
And should is force because should is control. Yeah,
it's like it's literally like the energetics of that has become so obvious to me. It's crazy when you see it. So listeners, I like want to just repeat this again for you to be able to apply this in your own life. Once you start noticing, it's insane. Like where there is force, you are met with immediate energetic resistance.
So if you are telling yourself, oh, I have to do this, I should do this, some other part of you was instantly be like, no, I don't.
Yeah. Even if it's pleasurable.
Even if so that was the point I was going to get you. Maybe I see this. Yeah. Maybe there's some way a playful way of growing the podcast that we actually both would fucking love doing. Maybe not, right?
No, I hear what
Totally
you're
willing to
saying.
acknowledge. But maybe there's one that just seems so fucking fun to both of us, and it is completely unavailable because it feels like we have to. And therefore we're like, no, I don't want to fucking do anything. Stompy teenager style.
Boop, boop. I feel like you've just captured my whole essence in a bottle right here. Like, yes, this is the thing that I'm constantly struggling with, because the fact that I have so much resistance to even doing some of the shoulds is to me a sign that there's somewhere where I'm caught up in, I'm triggered somehow a little bit. So I'm not free. So I'm not acting from a free place. But if I was free, I might actually want to create, I don't know, an audiogram. I don't know, whatever basic example.
Right.
But
right. If truly no thing is required, if like, then
what would you do? Basically, it's like, what would you do if you were free? Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, do you know what the answer occurred to me just now?
What?
We would just go be fucking guests on other people's podcasts.
Oh, that is true. I mean, yeah, that is true, because I know that it's already something that, you know,
because every time we go on someone else's podcast, we have a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Exactly what we're doing here with other very cool people.
Yeah. But it wouldn't be, because I have to say, like, when it's under the name of like, let me do this because I like, well, there's an energy of like force, actually. It stresses me out, and then I don't do it.
And you don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it's
same.
like, oh wait, I'm forgetting the coming back into the sovereignty, the freedom, the it's like, oh wait, but I actually want to do that.
Yeah. It's not required. Like, I can conjure that we have our tens of thousands of listeners, and also I actually love talking to other people about this shit. Literally all I want to do is talk about this shit. So of course I want to go be a guest on other people's podcasts. Hit us up with your recommendations.
Yeah. Hook us up, friends.
Then like, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Like, that's our answer.
Kyley. Okay, sorry. But okay, so I'm glad that we got to this answer, because I think there's probably a couple more like gems in there about like, what would we do? Yeah. But I think that whole piece that you just mentioned of like, I don't even know what you just said, but it was very important. And I need to go back and listen to it, because and the funny thing is, this is also what I talk to my clients about all the time, like action from a sovereign place. Like, we are not influenced by anything outside of yourself and your own truth and like an actual desire. So it's not a should, but it's also not a rebellion.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, I still am playing around with the ideas like of like, do I actually like the steps? And I think what I'm realizing is that no, I resist the steps. And I think this is why it's helpful to be in partnership with you, because you don't have that as much. And so you're more willing to play with, okay, but if we don't have resistance, then what would we really do? Which is actually what we need. That's the truth. Like, I don't actually think the answer is to do nothing, not because I don't want to, just because I don't actually think I don't want to do nothing. Do you know what I mean? I think I want to do nothing. I think I want to have tens of thousands of listeners and to be able to do that by having nothing. I don't know if that's actually true. I think that's a statement that I'm making because I'm afraid of how much work it's going to take and how like blah, 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 blah. Or how hard it's going to be or blah, 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 that if we had to make effort. I think if I was truly free, I'd be like, oh, let's have some fun.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
I'm realizing right now how I think I have subconsciously like squashed things. I'm realizing right now, like, okay, remember we were like, oh, let's do like every other week we'll go live on Instagram for 20 minutes and talk about the podcast, and it will be a way that people who are following us but I listen to the podcast will get like you know, an appetizer and then want to come listen to the podcast. We did it once, it was really fun, like super fun. All I ever want to do is hang out and talk to you. And then the second time we were going to do it, like my phone died, it didn't send me your message, like weird technology failure. And now I'm like, oh, that's totally because like I could make a pattern that's like, oh, I thought it was, some part of me thought it was required, therefore I was rejecting it subconsciously, because conscious me was like, yeah, I'm gonna hang out and talk to Eva. But subconscious me was like, we don't do things that we have to do, so we're killing this off.
Totally. Oh, totally. That's what I mean when I say like I do that all the time in my business, all the time. Like it's and I am not, and I think I see this in business a lot too, like people who are in rebellion and therefore they're not, end up limiting themselves because rebellion is just as much of a cage. And then you're just like,
Oh
not
yeah.
actually, but interesting though. I would say, yeah, I mean, we can, yeah, we kill things off. I would actually also say though that if I'm being honest, I think the trouble with that specific project was that it's harder for us to schedule than we think.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah. My schedule is actually horrifying.
meaning
so
like
there's that too.
Meaning like I think, I don't,
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. So maybe the should had less to do with I have to do this for the podcast, more like some time. Anyways, yes, I completely agree. But I'm just observing now the way in which, like our subconscious quote unquote protects us.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I'm still, I just went on this whole thing about how like I think the free me might want to actually do something like be a guest on someone else's podcast. And that might be true. I am going to continue to play around with this idea of I think I need to spend some time getting more clear and more sovereign, or more looking at my should, so that I can come back to like a truer place. Because like, I'm not gonna lie, that part of me that does sound appealing too. Like, do we need the steps? Is it possible to just, I just like playing around with that idea. Is it possible to just do what we're doing and get tens of thousands of listeners? Or is that delusional? Or is that closer to the truth? Or, is that not delusional? If I start to think that's delusional, maybe that's actually closer to being sane.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the part of you who like, that's your insurance policy, is the you that has to come out and be like, but maybe this is crazy. Like, don't go all the way into this. Keep one toe out.
Yep.
There was one other thing I was just gonna say. Shit, I was really excited to say it. Sorry, Jennifer. Oh, it's totally gone.
Do you want to think while I take a pee break?
Yeah.
Do you need to take a pee break?
I guess I could. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
One sec.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so I didn't poop, but my toilet was clogged.
Oh no.
So, I mean, I have pooped today, clearly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The whole family
Let's
has,
hope.
but
Let's hope.
that's why that took so long.
Oh my god. Is it fixed or is it done for?
Yeah, I just no, it's fine. I just was plunged in the toilet on the podcast break.
Hi Jennifer. This is what we're doing now.
For everyone's enjoyment.
Yeah. Okay. I'm actually realizing I do have to go soon.
Yeah, I was saying I feel like also we've kind of reached a
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to I want to acknowledge that we didn't get to your thing, though I think it's important. And it's like bothering me like that we're not getting to it.
In some ways, I think we did, because like my willingness to well, actually, I think it's interesting because I think I just like threw up a bunch of smoke screen dust, so we didn't have to go there probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, kind of. That's why I'm like, let's go back there.
yeah. And actually, that is kind of a big thing for me, so I probably would. And I think it's actually something that you're really like is a strength of yours. So I probably would actually enjoy if we did go back there.
Yeah, sure. Maybe some other.
So
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. It will not be a thing I've solved by 2 weeks from now. So.
Or who knows? Okay. I mean, but to be honest, you're saying it's a strength. Anyway, whatever. I don't want to. We're just okay. So where did we leave off? Was there anything else we need to say?
Okay, guys, we have gone on this meandering journey for a very long time, and
we just took a break and we came back and we thought, I think we're done.
We think this is as good a spot to end as any.
Yeah. I did check in with Kyley. We're going to come back to her thing at a later point.
Yeah.
When I don't have to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Should we do Joy?
Yeah. This is just a funny way to end the podcast, but I like that we can always bring it back to Joy.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's something bringing you joy?
My answer this week is that I've been really enjoying hanging out with my parents, specifically. So it's not without its challenges. My parents are, I'm wondering if I'm assuming a lot of people can relate to this. I fucking love my parents so much. Like, we're actually incredibly close. And they are lifelines for me in so many ways, and they are rocks. And I just, like, when I think about my parents, I just love them. I don't know how else to say it. They're my people, and we have a really special relationship. They're also very difficult people. They're also people who sometimes, they're my rock, and sometimes I have to be their rock, and sometimes there's like just stuff going on. And so, but really, I've just been like, when I think about like there's some intentions that I have set for myself when I'm in Taiwan, and one of like top of that list is just spending quality time with my parents. And it's just been really nice, because I don't get to, it makes me sad sometimes that they're so far away. And I'm just really appreciating being able to like be in there. I don't know, me and my mom really enjoy watching like really not old movies, but we have the same movies that we watch over and over and over again.
Oh,
do you ever do that? Do you watch movies over and over again?
I am actually kind of impatient about watching the same movies over and over again.
Yeah. I think it's a personality thing, because Adam can't do it either. He's like, I don't know how you do it, but I have like I have like these 15 movies that I probably have seen 100 times, and Pretty Woman is on the list with my
Oh,
mom.
that's a good one.
Coming to America is another one that we watch. Anyway, and those are just like movies that we kind of watched together when I was younger. Clueless, she didn't watch Clueless, but I've seen Clueless 1,000 times. Yeah, just like little things like that. It's like, I don't mean to be morbid, but like maybe because my parents are older now, I oftentimes think about like what's going to happen when they pass. And I think it's going to not be like the big things. It's always like the little things, right? It's like watching a movie together, cooking something together, like in a kitchen, or just like the little things that are normalized. And then you miss them when they're gone. So yeah, that's my joy. What about you, friend?
My joy definitely has some complicated feelings in it too, which is that Birdie turns 3 tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And someone was like, this was something I did not know about motherhood until it makes perfect sense, but like your kids' birthdays are so bittersweet.
Yeah. Can you
And
tell
I don't
me
know if
about that a
that,
little bit more?
yeah, I don't know if that will like be forever, but at this stage, like, because it's just marking the passing of time, you know, and so much of the conflict of motherhood is like, am I doing this right? And am I loving this enough? And am I soaking this up enough? Because it all feels like it's like this, you're like almost like racing the clock, right? Like it's so, the thing that everyone says to you is like, oh, oh, I miss those days. Enjoy them before they're gone. It'll be over before you know it. Like so much of motherhood, especially of young kids, is wrapped up in this narrative of like, soak up as much as you can.
They're only this
Which
age once, and there is, I can understand like that pressure, because like they'll be, well, I don't know, they'll be adults for a long time, but they're only going to be 3 for 1 or 2
right. And like you're like, like I walk into the room and Birdie like runs up to me and like gives me a million kisses and like, like she's not gonna do that when she's 21, like we'll have a different kind of intimacy. Um and also that creates a lot of should oriented pressure, and it's a swampy thing to navigate. And your kid's birthday is like, at least in my experience, is just like a moment of reflection.
Yeah.
And so she'll be 3 tomorrow. I always don't work on my kids' birthdays. I like take the that's always a thing. And so like I have a lot of fun things planned for us, and today we made pink cupcakes because that was the color she picked. And like,
yeah,
she is so ferocious, so funny. She just she is one of the coolest humans that I know, like really, truly. It's hard to even describe, but like all like she just is. She knows how she wants to move in this world in a way that honestly feels like it's the thing that all of us are trying to fucking remember. And she just exists as that. And so I'm just constantly enamored and in awe of her. And it's going by really fast. And I hope I'm doing it right.
Yeah. Well, there is no doing it right. So
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I'm actually tearing up, listeners, even as like that statement is like a patently ridiculous statement, like, and also like, yeah, that's
a deep desire. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what's sorry, go ahead.
oh, just yeah, so that's it. My baby turns 3 tomorrow, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, happy birthday, Birdie. I can see why it's bittersweet. And I think what's super fascinating to me about this is that you're giving me language for also something that I didn't really like take time to go into. but it's really actually fascinating to observe is that some of what you're experiencing is a little bit of what I'm experiencing with my parents. But on the other end, it just makes me feel like this whole, it's just like a reflection on life. Like the thing that you said about how it's a race against time. And I don't know, something else that you said, I was like, oh, like that's exactly what being with my parents has actually been making me. Oh yeah. The measurement of time passing, because what happens is like, every time I come back, like when you see your parent, when you see someone older, when you see someone regularly, the change is incremental, so it's not as drastic. But every time I come back, they're older than the last time, and I'm always like, oh, enjoy this time, because I can. Then every time I think, oh, but they're old now. But then I'm like, no, they're young now, because next time I see them, then they're going to be older then, and it's just been happening like over the course of a couple of years, and it's like a real like, whoa, like needing to appreciate this. And it's interesting to observe you talk about how it's this appreciation in some way of like this life, and also like but early stages of life, and then also wanting to appreciate the other people in our life who are at the end of their like, and closer to the end of their life. And it just makes me feel like you kind of have to appreciate all the way through.
Right. It's like these like made up markers, right? Of like as opposed to like, oh, my 37 years, whatever. Fuck, you know what I mean?
I mean, it's like why people are always like, well, you never know what's going to happen. So you really just got to appreciate every day. But I do think there is like early stages of life and late stages of life really bring this up for us. And I think in a good way,
there's like a preciousness to them.
Force us, or remind us, it's not force, but remind us to look at things and like to really savor things. And it is bittersweet. Like hanging out with my parents, I think is important. Like it feels like that sacredness, because I just know that every time now it's just not going to be the same. And it already has been every single time. And it's weird. And it kind of sucks. And it's also kind of like beautiful though, too. Or, I guess it's beautiful just because it's a measure of so much love.
Yeah. It's like,
it's like the growing of a baby is kind of akin to like the death of a parent. Like these are the things that like bookmark your understanding of time.
I think that is absolutely true. And I think my current, like a place, an edge for me right now is like, what does it mean to relish motherhood without playing the game of should, the game of guilt and pressure, and what do I have to do? Like, what is, and I don't know. And that is in a way that I can do that in lots of other areas of my life. It feels honestly sometimes pretty complicated. But like, what does it mean to like love my kids, show up for them, and not play this like living death game of should?
Coming back to our conversation. And I don't have the answer, because I think it's an ongoing thing, but I do suspect that some of it has to do with first embracing that sometimes you're going to feel should, like allowing, instead of like, you know what I mean, like the judge, what you were talking about, judging yourself for being like, well, I shouldn't feel the should, but actually, what if you should? Like, what if you can allow that to be part of your process?
Fucking gold. Genius over here.
I mean, it's the same rule that we can apply over and over again to so many things in our life.
I love that. Thank you. That was a great gift. Okay. All right. Thank you. This was the best.
Thank you. I love you. I thank you, listeners. If you guys like this show, by the way, subscribe, share it with your friends, leave a review.
Share it with your tens of thousands of friends.
Tens of thousands of friends. Yes. And actually, hit us up with your other friends who have podcasts so that we can go and join them and give us the hookup.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
We love you.